and all. What is a TradWife? I'm seeing that in the comments. It happened to me too when I first came across the story. I'm like, what's a TradWife? Come on in, gang. We're going to find out, and you're going to absolutely love it. Great to be with all of you here. Live stream Friday. I am Dr. Steve, your patron professor, here to help you think better so you can feel better in these crazy and turbulent times. So make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button if you have not already done so. Join our online community. It'd be an awesome privilege to have you. It's been a couple of weeks since our last live stream. Of course, I was on my cruise last week with our Turley Talks team, celebrating our 1 million subscribers mark, having a wonderful time. But we are up and ready to go. Super chats are up, so send me your questions. Our moderator, Josh, is here to compile them, and I will answer them in due course. My oh my, gang, strap yourselves in. The feminists are freaking out. They're utterly besides themselves. We're talking weeping and gnashing of teeth. Weeping and gnashing of teeth. They're freaking out over a new social media trend that's going viral. And that trend is, according to these feminists, I got the receipts, that trend is reawakening and romanticizing an era when sexism and racism ruled the day, and women have to band together and stop this trend once and for all. There's just one problem. The trend is entirely comprised of women. Traditionalist women. That's where TradWife comes from. Traditionalist women are leading the trend, and feminists have absolutely no idea how to respond to this. Come on in, guys, one and all. Come on in. And I'm going to show you all why feminists can't do anything about this. Actually, I'm going to show you all. I got the receipts. That's why you come here. I'm going to show you all how the rise of the TradWife movement, the traditionalist wife movement, is actually destroying feminism as we speak and demonstrating unequivocally that woke leftism as a whole is going the way of the dodo bird. It's going extinct, and there is absolutely nothing they can do to stop it. All that and more on this live stream Friday. But of course, before we dive in here, gang, we do have to pay for the electricity here. And there's no better way to do that than clicking on the link below and trying out for yourself the new technology behind My Pillow 2.0. It's amazing. Mike Lindell has absolutely outdone himself with a new fabric temperature regulating technology that keeps you comfortable all throughout the night. You're going to absolutely love it, and you get the same amazing savings as always if you use promo code Turley. So normally My Pillow costs $69.98. Hey, thanks, Brooks Kelly, and I'll definitely be answering questions as in due course. My classic My Pillow is normally $69.98. Use promo code Turley. All of a sudden, magic happens. That $69.98 turns into $19.98. How's that for savings? That applies to their 200 products in their catalog. So don't wait. Click on that link below. Get the gift of comfort and warmth to yourself, to your loved ones, to fellow patriots in your life. Support one of America's most amazing patriots, Mike Lindell, and get the best savings ever with promo code Turley. Click on that link below right now. All right, gang, we paid for the electricity. Let's dive right in here. As I'm sure all of you know, those of you who've been a regular to this program, and if not, again, make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. But if you've been with me for some time, you'll know that my idol, for lack of a better term, is the Immortal Rush Limbaugh. Rush, more than anyone else, shaped my conservative journey, which began back in 1994. And Rush, in many respects, converted me in more ways than one. I mean, he opened up a whole new world to me. I ended up entering into the church. I mean, you name it. And I had the honor of meeting him briefly in New York in 1996. And what he did is he signed an autographed copy of, or he autographed a copy of his 35 undeniable truths of life. Do you guys remember that? 35 undeniable truths of life. Some of them were, there is a God. Abortion is wrong. Evolution cannot explain creation, which is ontologically true, by the way. But my favorite of the 35 is this one. Feminism was established, do you remember this? Feminism was established to allow unattractive women access to the mainstream of society. Only Rush could have come up with that. I mean, that is so Rush. Feminism was established so as to allow unattractive women access to the mainstream of society. I have to tell you that this undeniable truth, this law of the universe, as Rush would have it, immediately came to mind when I came across all of these articles reporting on the utter panic, the hysteria, as I said earlier, the weeping and the gnashing of teeth among feminists in their delirious, frantic response to a movement that's gone viral called TradWife. Now, TradWife stands for traditional wives. And if you don't know what a TradWife is, or the way it's working itself out in social media, it's a new social media trend where housewives are posting videos of their daily life, cooking, cleaning, taking care of the kids, homeschooling, and it's huge. I mean, both critics and proponents alike are likening it to something akin to the New Look movement of the 1940s that dawned all the magazine, Life magazine and so forth, or the emergence of Mediterranean cooking in the 1990s, particularly in Britain. It's literally as if Gen Z and millennials had never even conceived of this concept of a traditional wife. They've never encountered anything like this. It's like encountering some extraterrestrial life. And it's called the housewife, the extraterrestrial wife. And they're enamored with it. These videos are getting millions upon millions upon millions of views, particularly on TikTok. So a trad wife is a woman who doesn't work. She's not a professional. And she has absolutely no aspirations to be one. And instead, she finds fulfillment in being married, having children, looking after their children, taking care of their home and husband. And then she talks nonstop about how fulfilling and wonderful such a life actually is. And they show on video after video, these vlogs, as they are, these video blogs, they show just how busy they are, how complicated and complex it is to run a home effectively and efficiently. And it's a trend that's absolutely exploding. Just last week, the British Guardian reported trad wives were being interviewed on the BBC. They were being interviewed in the Daily Mail, in the Times. So it is now officially cool. It is hip. It is cutting edge to be a traditionalist housewife. We're now talking tradition as the new avant-garde. Now, if you're a follower of this channel for any length of time, you'll know this is hardly a surprise for us, right? Who knows? Put it in the chat. Why is this not even remotely a surprise for us? For those of us who recognize that the world is indeed becoming more conservative, more traditionalist, more religious, more nationalist, populist, civilizationalist, we have always known that the world was going to see traditionalism as more hip and cool and the wave of the future. In fact, one of the theories that we talk about often on this channel for how a more conservative world will look is a theory known as, who knows it? Archaeofuturism. As our world is experiencing a massive shift away from what scholars call the modern world to a far more what we call postmodern world. So as we're moving away from the world that began with the Enlightenment in the 18th century that was founded on the fundamental tenets of scientific rationalism as a one-size-fits-all vision of reality, that is inherently liberal. This is why conservatives are always black-pilled. This is why conservatives are always despairing and always ready to build their bunker, because everywhere they look, it's as if everything that we love and revere is just falling apart, and the world as a whole is just becoming more and more liberal. Well, it's because it was. It's called the modern world. It's why even the Republican Party is so pathetic 99% of the time. The modern world, by its nature, seeks to liberate and emancipate humanity away from the superstitions of religion and tradition to the enlightenment of a brave new world of scientific rationalism, right? So as our world shifts away from that modernity, which is what it's doing, that's why there's no reason to be black-pilled. We can be frustrated that it's taking so long, but there's no reason to be black-pilled because the entire world is moving away from liberal progressive modernity and embracing instead post-modernity. And as such, the world is rejecting a one-size-fits-all globalist WEF utopia, and instead going back to nation, culture, custom, tradition, to quite literally pre-modern, archaic beliefs and practices, while at the same time maintaining modern technology. So this is something akin to what the theorist Guillaume Faye referred to as archaeofuturism. Some call it techno-primitivism. But it's the notion that the antithesis between science and religion, technology and tradition, that's at the heart of the modern world and that's pushed progressivism for 300 years, that antipathy is being dispensed with. And now those two forces of science and religion, technology and tradition are joining together, like what we're seeing increasingly in neo-Orthodox Russia. This is why progressive liberals and neocons hate Russia, because neo-Orthodox Russia is archaeofuturist, or neo-Confucian China, or Shinto Japan, or Hindu nationalist India, or the neo-Ottoman Turkey, or theocratic Iran and Afghanistan. We can go on and on and on and on. So the traditional and the technological are more and more coming together in this increasingly postmodern world and post-liberal world. And so it's not surprising, given that we're moving into a postmodern, post-liberal, post-globalist era, that the traditional wife is now hip. The traditional wife is now considered cutting edge. It's fully consistent with a futuristic notion of the rapprochement between technology and tradition, where progressivism is being replaced with a resurgent traditionalism. But don't tell feminists that. Feminists are and remember, feminism is part of modernism. Feminists are absolutely freaking out over, I'll give you some of the headlines I came across. This is from Fox, just reporting on the phenomenon. Homemaking over hustle culture. Critics claim TikTok's viral TradWife movement romanticizes sexism. Some say the lifestyle is a way to push back against post-COVID burnout. Interesting. New York Post, TikTok's viral TradWife trend accused of romanticizing an era where sexism and racism ruled. This is from Vice, so these are the true feminist, leftist believers behind the rise of the online TradWife movement. And the byline reads, trad ideology doesn't, and that's interesting, trad, not trans ideology, trad. Maybe that's the contrast we're going to have to break out between the modern and postmodern, the globalist and post-globalist world. Trad ideology doesn't just extend to 1950s housewife videos. It also has sinister connections with right-wing extremism. Experts say. They don't put experts in the quote, but who are these experts, right? Well, Obviously, they're part of the clerisy class, the woke clerisy class of the new religious fundamentalists who impose their woke ideology on the rest of us. Or this one is from the British Guardian. TradWives, the new trend for submissive women, has a dark heart and history. New trend for submissive women. I love it. Absolutely love it. When you read through these articles, they're all saying the same freaking thing. They're all saying the same boring, predictable, ad nauseum talking point nonsense. Cis, straight, white women are longing today for a time when sexism and racism ruled. That's it. That's literally it. That's literally, these women, whatever that means, by the way, right? We're in an enlightened era where we don't know the meaning of the word woman. And yet we're supposed to celebrate the first black woman to get on the Supreme Court. But we don't know what a woman is. Don't define a woman. Essentialists don't. But regardless, we're in an era where these women, whatever it is, are guilty of longing for an age when sexism, whatever that is, I don't know how you can know what sexism is if you don't know what a woman is. But regardless, they're longing for an age of sexism and, of course, racism, whatever that is. They're longing for an age when sexism and racism ruled. I'm just going to say it. The left has no other frames of reference with which to make sense of reality than race, gender, and sex. None. And environment, ecology. For the woke left, reality is inconceivable, to use the Princess Bride term, inconceivable apart from the constant threats of a racist, sexist, phobic, white male patriarchy that for some reason is causing so many women to voluntarily submit. They literally cannot conceive of reality behind these myopic, patriarchal, and utterly putrid frames of reference. They have lost the vocabulary to describe anything as true and good and beautiful. Nothing in life can be appreciated as authentic, as noble, as praiseworthy, as upstanding, as decent. Nothing. It's all either on the side of the victim or on the side of the victimizer. Everything is partisanized. It's either oppressor or oppressed. Right? This is the cultural Marxist categories of identity politics. You are going to be herded in one of two groups. You're either an oppressor or you're oppressed. You're either a victimizer or you're victimized. There's no other category of thought for these people. If there is, I don't see it. And that's why they're so out of touch with reality. Well, mostly. They are in touch with reality in that they are reluctantly recognizing that there is a massive backlash, like they never imagined their worst nightmares, against all things woke. Salon.com has an article out, I think it just came out today, entitled, "The Woke Wars Are Worse Than You Think." Now, again, these are far leftists panicking over this. And here's how the article starts. It's fascinating. When Republicans use the word woke, it's a deliberate bit of obfuscation. So you didn't know that, but when we use the word woke, they know us better than we know ourselves. They know our psychology better than we do, because I didn't know this. We are deliberately obfuscating. We are deliberately, that's what we're doing. Again, whatever that means. When Republicans use the word woke, it's a deliberate bit of obfuscation, a way to signal. I did not know that. I'm signaling. Did you know that? Did you know you're transmitting? I didn't. Wow. I'm learning so much. And again, since they're leftists, remember they can only think in certain categories, in certain identity, bifurcated categories. Okay, so take a listen. When Republicans use the word woke, it's a deliberate bit. And by the way, it's not just Republicans who use the word woke. I'm sorry. It's an analyst in me. Bill Maher isn't a Republican. Bill Maher is not a Republican. Up until fairly recently, Elon Musk had never voted Republican. Russell Brand is not a Republican. Jordan Peterson is not a Republican. How about when people, can we use that? Can we think outside of the strange partisanized bifurcation? How about when people use the word woke? It's a deliberate bit of obfuscation, a way to signal bigotry to their fellow travelers while pretending it's something else to those who call them out for it. It's just bad writing, but alas. But it's also pretty hard to ignore the bullhorn levels of racism. I mean, this is bad writing. Oh, gosh. Anyway, I know I have a good friend who's from Greece who speaks with, he's a professor who speaks with a very thick accent, and his students always complain that he has such a thick accent. And he says, I may speak with an accent, but you write with an accent. Just think of that. But it's also pretty hard to ignore the bullhorn levels of racism that are often embedded in complaints about woke culture. When Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican of Georgia, complains that it's woke to let black women sing at the Super Bowl, for example, the only rational conclusion define rational. The only rational conclusion is that it's their skin color that offends her. Isn't it ironic that the very people who categorize us according to skin color, are you oppressor or oppressed? Well, take a look at how you look. That'll let you know which category you belong to, right? White fragility and all. These very people are the first to just project their nonsense on others. You can see my point here. This person writing for the ultra-left Salon.com that licks this stuff up cannot possibly conceive of legitimate critiques of wokeness or what we're calling woke. They can't conceive of what a legitimate critique of wokeness could be. There's no such thing as legitimate dissent for these people. All dissent from leftist progressive norms are by definition racist, sexist, and phobic. There's no middle ground. There's no ground of discussion apart from these bifurcated, partisanized frames of reference. I was talking about this with Dinesh D'Souza last week. This is because the left is enamored with something called totalizing categories, right? Write that down. That's a cool term to be associated with. Totalizing categories, by definition, don't allow for any dissent. So woke activists don't think in terms of constitutional rights. They think in terms of human rights. And then they break down those human rights into sub-totalizing categories, as it were. LGBT rights, minority rights, women's rights. And so the key here is that there's no legitimate dissent from these rights. In other words, if you dissent from human rights, you're by definition what? You're anti-human, right? There's no dissenting as I don't buy the way you're defining human. I don't buy the way you're defining rights. I mean, this is a very modernist conception. It's a very atheistic conception, very secularized conception. All that nuance, that very important historically contingent nuance, philosophical nuance, is thrown to the wind. Right? You're by definition anti-human. If you dissent from women's rights, you are a sexist. If you dissent from minority rights, you are a racist. You are a bigot, and on and on and on. So the woke outworking of these totalizing categories is an extension of what Herbert Marcuse advocated decades ago when he referred to it as repressive tolerance, where the only political views that are allowed are those of the victim, the oppressed. Anything they affirm should be tolerated. The victimizer, the oppressor, the dominant ethnic, gender category has to be oppressed. This is what's known as repressive tolerance. Anything the dominant category believes, the conservatives, needs to be repressed. It needs to be shut down as bigoted, as sexist, as all kinds of phobic. Right. And then this article goes on to complain that so many have been blaming of late wokeness for the collapse of SVB and Signature Bank, because these banks gave tens of millions of dollars to BLM and they were pushing all these woke initiatives and all this sort of stuff. And she goes on to say, that's not true, that's not fair, and that's all just dog whistling for a bunch of racist bigots. And so the article warned her fellow leftists that the woke wars are just heating up, precisely because these racist sentiments are coming to the fore. But what these woke leftists, particularly at Salon.com, do not get is what's really behind the rise of the woke wars. And what's really behind the rise of all this, it's not racism, it's not bigotry, it's not sexism, it's none of all that. What's behind the rise of the TradWife, what's behind the rise of the backlash against woke leftism, at least in part, is the real reason, is the fact that the traditional family is growing, all the while liberal progressives are dying. And that's not hyperbole. The people behind Salon.com are demographically imploding. The people behind the TradWife are demographically growing. This isn't hard. You don't need a PhD for this. Demographics is destiny, particularly when it comes to religion and politics. We know that from the heritability chart of where, well, I'll get into it in a moment. Liberalism embraces what's called lifestyle values. And lifestyle values, when all said and done, basically separate sex from procreation. All right, so this is largely through modern contraception. And right or wrong, good or bad, irrelevant to me. What liberal lifestyle values necessitates, because it has amputated sex from procreation, what liberal lifestyle values necessitates is the freedom not to reproduce. You see, the traditional vision of sex is that the traditional family, again, for right or for wrong, gets to dictate what is and what is not legitimate sex. So historically, it is basically within the bounds of family, marriage, right, that produces children and family and carries on the civilization. That's why the family is the bedrock of civilization. The moment we found technologically that we could separate, we can amputate sex from procreation, or from children, we began to replace, in this really cool liberal way, progressive way, we began to replace prophetic tradition, primarily through our religious traditions, as the guidance for what is legitimate sex, and we replace that with personal preference. So now we have sexual preference. Personal preference is now the defining factor of what is and what is not legitimate sex. Now, I'm sorry, the studies are in. That's been going on for decades, and I don't care which side you fall on, whether you believe prophetic tradition should be guiding what's legitimate sex or personal preference. It's irrelevant to me. The studies are in. And what we have found in every single demographic study is that if you're all in with personal preference as guiding what is and what is not legitimate sex, you are demographically imploding. And if you're all in with prophetic religious traditions guiding what is legitimate sex, you're having more kids and you're reproducing more than ever before, largely because we've solved the problem of infant mortality. A number of studies have examined, as precisely as they can, the fertility differentials between atheists and religionists and between conservatives and liberals. In all kinds of demographic studies, all over the world, but particularly in North America and Europe, there is a clear pattern. There is a clear and direct linear relationship between how right-wing you are, to use the partisan language, and how many children you have. So in 2010, the average number of children born to, say, the far left, the secular progressive left in the United States, was about 1.8. It's gone down far beyond that now. I think it's more close to 1. In Europe, it even goes below 1. 1 child per couple. That is way below the 2.1 replacement level. If you're not hitting the 2.1 replacement level, you're shrinking. You're demographically imploding. On the other hand, when you looked at those who fell under the category of the so-called far right, and they were traditionally patriots, conservative Christians, and the like, it was 2.8 children per couple. It was not just way above the replacement level. It's significantly above the far left level. This is both in the United States and Europe. So on average, conservatives have a fertility advantage of 41% over liberals. Now, you have to understand what that means over time. If both populations are evenly split, so say you have 50% liberals, 50% conservatives, and there's a 41% fertility advantage for conservatives. In one generation, that 50-50 population split becomes 60-40. In 2 generations, 75-25. And in 10 generations, 99-1. So what you have to understand is we're already seeing this, for example, inside the religious community, particularly inside of our churches here in the States. So between 1960 and the year 2000, conservative evangelicals went from representing about 20% of Protestant churches to today around 60%. And what we're finding is the conversion rates are very minimal. What's contributing to this massive growth is demography. Conservative evangelicals are having a lot more kids than liberal Protestants. And so just over the course of about, 40 years, they've tripled their representation within the Protestant church. All said in just another decade or so, demographers are predicting that the United States will have approximately 4 far-right white females for every 1 far-left white female. That's where we're going. And don't think that, well, that doesn't mean the kids are going to go and hold on to the conservatism. Sorry, that doesn't work. We've got the data on it. And that's what I meant by religion and politics being highly heritable. So on a scale of 0.0 to 1.0, if something is 0.5 heritable, it means it's more or less half inherited, half socialized, right? Half genetic, half cultural. Right? So diabetes could be 0.5 on the heritability scale. But that's also a bit misleading because for some, diabetes might be 0.8 on the heritable scale, which means it's, for lack of better terms, 80% inherited and only 20% environmental. Whereas for others, diabetes might be 0.1 heritable, right? So that would make it overall, aggregate-wise, around a 0.5 heritability scale, on 0.5 on the heritability scale. When we look at religion and political persuasion, what we find is that the more far right you are, for lack of a better term, just using the term that demographic studies use, the more far right, the more conservative, the more born again, you name it, you are, the more heritable it seems to be. The more your children retain that far rightness into adulthood. Amish have about 80 to 85% retention rates, and it's been going up over the last 30 years. We've been following Eric Kaufman of the University of London has traced that out. So over the last 30 years or so, Amish used to have about 70% retention rates. Now as the world gets more woke, ironically, I don't know if there's a one-to-one correlation, but now it's about 80, 85%. So it's the same across the board for far-right kids. Yeah, I know around 18, 19, they end up going a little crazy and wacky, but they tend to come back around 25 or 26, especially when they start having kids and start having to build a life. They go back to what they know. That's just the trends. So, and why we consider it heritable is because our religious and political sentiments tend to come from our temperaments. Jordan Peterson was talking about this the other day. It tends to come from our temperaments, and our temperament is largely inherited. So sorry, there's no way out of this. We know what the future is going to be. It is going to be far right, for lack of a better term. It's going to be highly Christian, in the West, that is. It's going to be highly Christian. It's going to be highly nationalist, populist, traditionalist, highly MAGA, highly America first. And the woke left is going to be a very unpleasant memory. Maybe a funny one sometimes, but that's where we're going. So all of this panic that surrounds the woke wars and the trending tradwives is all but the tip of the iceberg of just how out of touch the woke left is with reality. Because what's the irony to all this when all is said and done? If you haven't figured out the fundamental value of replacing yourself demographically, then obviously your ideology, no matter what it is, no matter how virtuous, isn't going to be around very long. And that's exactly what's happening right before our very eyes. Their liberal ideology is disappearing slowly, frustratingly, but surely. Woke leftism is dying out. And we've got the tradwives to thank for it. Over to you guys. Love you. Let's see some of these questions. Josh, our moderator, is assembling them. And as he does so, gang, speaking of Josh, for you Patriot business owners out there, you've got to meet my good friend Josh Zaglowski, co-founder of ERC Specialists. He's got an amazing payroll protection company exclusively dedicated to understanding and maximizing what's called the CARES Act Employee Retention Credit. If you are a small business owner looking to get back $26,000 per employee from bumbling Biden, click on that link in the description below to see if you qualify today. It is an absolutely amazing opportunity. All right, let's see what we got. Joshy here. Yeshua, our great and faithful moderator. Brooks Kelly, thank you for the gift there. Do you think the ladies will sponsor Florida orange juice? Seriously, is this a sign of revival more than traditionalism? Brooks, great question. I wouldn't make so the way I analyze, and everyone's analysis is going to be a little different, and you just have to be consistent with how you define your terms and how you organize and so forth. I don't make a distinction between revival and traditionalism. So I'm not talking like sort of a Protestant critique of tradition. Traditionalism, I'm using in a civilizationalist sense of going back to things like tradition is a term. It goes to the Latin term traditore, and traditore means to hand over. It's related to the term traitor. You hand somebody over, right, wrongly in that sense or whatever. But tradition is simply the notion that beliefs, institutions, and practices of the past should in the present be defended so as to guarantee our flourishing in the future. So past, present, and future are all bound together in this notion of tradition, and tradition embodies eternity. Paul talks about it this way. He uses the Greek word paradidomi in 1 Corinthians 11, of that which I handed over, I paradidomied to you. This is how you're to carry it out. And he's talking about the Lord's Supper. And he says, as often as you eat of this bread and drink of this cup now, you proclaim the Lord's death in the past until he comes again in the future. That's how I'm using the term tradition. It's a way of orienting our lives towards eternity through beliefs, institutions, and practices of the past that are absolutely indispensable for our human flourishing in the future. Liberalism wants to throw tradition out. Liberalism says tradition is just superstition and knuckle dragging and ignorant, and it's got nothing to do with a brave new world. So going back and embracing religious revival, right, for example, is thoroughly in line with how I'm using that term retraditionalization that's going on today. So I would say it's both and in that sense. Great question, Brooks. Mitchell Ryan, hey Mitchell, do you think that the Trump-DeSantis fight will split the party? I keep hearing rumors of DeSantis running. Yeah, we'll see, Mitchell. I don't think in the end it will. I still believe we're going to see a Trump-DeSantis ticket. But in the end, no, I don't. At this point, I don't see it. I don't see it splitting the party. Adam Bowman, feminism was EST so unattractive women could have access. Yeah, established. So unattractive women could have access to mainstream of society. Rush Limbaugh. I love it. It's just so Rush. I mean, he was just so brilliant. Stephen Connors. Hey, Stephen. Everything old is new again. That's archaeofuturism, my friend. That's it. It's techno-primitivism. I mean, again, my wife is from Japan, and everywhere you go in Japan, you just see the technocratic, and we're talking cutting-edge technocracy, AI, robotics, and so forth. The technocratic intermixed with the traditional. They don't make a split distinction between the two the way we so often do in our woke world. Dapper Dave, my friend, my definition of woke is pretending to fight an injustice by creating the injustice yourself. Dude, that's freaking awesome. I love it. I'm writing it down. I'm not giving you any credit. I will do. Dapper Dave. I love it. Woke pretending to fight injustice by creating injustice. I love it. Yeah, I mean, I love it. I mean, again, that's so poetic. I mean, and while I'm thinking of it, I mean, there's a poetic conservatism or traditionalism, as we're talking about as well. I mean, the two, just as an aside, the two great works that Western civilization is based on, from a Greek perspective, is Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, and the Iliad is about people, the Greeks being far away from home, fighting the war in Troy, And in the Latin version, the opening line is in media res, in the middle of things, right? And as long as you're far away from home, the constant state is one of war and strife. So what's the Odyssey about? Well, it's literally about nostalgia. It's about returning home, right? It's Odysseus's travels. He actually leaves an island where he could have been a god. He could have been made immortal. He leaves the island so as to be able to return to his wife and family. And so in many respects, that is a Greek version of the prodigal son parable, where when we leave our Father's house, when we leave paradise, we leave the garden, we're constantly in a world of strife. So the only way to resolve that is to return. It's to come home. And what conservatism, what traditionalism fundamentally is an invitation to return home. It shows us the way back. So that's why I love Dapper Dave, your sort of your poetic way of explaining as opposed to technical in terms of wokeness. Technically, wokeness is it's a combination of what Jonathan Haidt refers to as the 5 foundations or the 5 aspects of the moral foundations of society. So all human brains are biologically wired to think in terms of 5 fundamental moral categories. So it's some kind of fairness, some kind of concern of safety, some kind of sanctity. Things are absolute and unquestionable and have that eternal sense. That would be our tradition. Some kind of authority, like the family and so on, and some kind of loyalty, some kind of obligation, social obligation. And what he found was that conservatives score evenly pretty much in all 5 categories. But liberals don't. Liberals, in fact, do not score in 3 of those 5 categories virtually at all. They have no sense of sanctity, no sense of authority, no sense of loyalty, because they're liberal, because they're modernists. And modernity wants to leave behind a religious traditionalist world where the sacred, the authoritative, and the loyal are key values. Instead, they are hyper-fixated on fairness and safety. They're hyper-fixated on equity, right, and people being harmed and hurt, right? And then when you couch that in cultural Marxist terms of oppressor versus oppressed, victimizer versus victim, then you've got wokeness. Because Bill Maher is still a liberal. So Bill Maher is still going to be hyper-fixated over fairness and safety. But he's not woke. He doesn't buy the oppressor-oppressed framework, the cultural Marxist oppressor-oppressed. That's when you get when you bring that hyper-fixatedness of just those 2 moral categories that disregard the other 3 of sanctity, authority, and loyalty. Then inevitably, and then you couch that with oppressor versus oppressed, you're going to be woke. You're going to think in those totalizing categories and treat all dissenters as profane and worthy of being excommunicated. Atom Ludensky, the truth has been spoken by Dr. Steve. Thank you. Well, thank you, sir. I do value truth. I do value loyalty and authority and the like. C'est brave. I appreciate your work and for sharing your insight. Well, thank you, sir. I very appreciate it. And Jason Stokes, have been a paying member for a long time, but don't know where to log in to access membership benefits. Oh, okay, Jason. Good question. Let's see. Why don't you just go ahead and email us? Email us at steve@turleytalks.com, and we'll have somebody on our staff make sure you can log in and get all your benefits. Absolutely, most certainly, we should have that. All right, guys. I think that is it for me for this week. It's been a lovely week. Great to be back with you all this week after I was gone for the previous week, and looking forward to the next one. Love you guys. God bless. Remember, we're courageous patriots, right? We start in despair. You come to this channel, you develop hope, and that hope leads to courage and rock and rolling. Love you guys. God bless.